kitchen ingredients have to do with thrifted items? Stick around because I'm going to show you.
Don't know how long it's been, I guess it doesn't matter. We've had our thick and thin, enough to know that I would rather not go through life without you.
Hi everybody, welcome to Ampersand Unique Gifts and Home Decor. My name is Sarah. If you like seeing thrifted items upcycled and sometimes repurposed into something completely different, you're definitely in the right place. I love to hit thrift stores and auctions and yard sales and even take items that family and friends give me and give them a new life. I am a local reseller. I have a website, ampersanduniquegifts.com, and I also sell through some of the local markets. But if you would like to see this journey and watch this business grow, then I would love if you would click subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you're notified every time we upload a new video. So anyway, let's get back to it and see how these items turned out. So I picked up this version of the print Praying Child. I have sold these before, but I am not loving this frame. It is wood. It is truly wood, but it's been painted in this like faux wood grain kind of shiny print. And I'm just not loving that. But it is completely finished and taped in. So I don't want to take this out and I don't want to paint it. But I want to get rid of this weird look. So we're going to use Hershey's Cocoa and Debi's Design Diary clear wax. So let's check this out. Let's see if we can make this happen. The first thing I needed to do was sand off the shiny. So I'm just using an old 220 sanding block and trying to get rid of all that shine. So using a chip brush, I am going to work that Debi's Design Diary clear wax into all of the grooves and the corners. There is detail around the print there. It has like 2 layers, so I'm going to get that wax down in there, and then we are going to add in our Hershey's Cocoa. So I start with just pouring some on the plate and then using a knife because that's what I had. And I'm just kind of blending it in and making a dark brown wax. And I'll use that same chip brush and I'll just work it down in those corners. So, yep, my cat just totally walked across the counter. She did get fussed at and had to get down, but she, I guess, was just being nosy. So I just take that and I rub it all over and continue to work it in the grooves. And then I decide to just go ahead and use my fingers. And I'm kind of pushing it down in there with that chip brush after I've added the extra, because I just felt like the wax that I made really wasn't getting that dust and that age that I wanted to here. I mean, I'm trying to really age it. I'm trying to take that orangey out of the frame. And so I'm just going to continue to do this. I'll mix wax, add it in there, and then again, just use my fingers to sprinkle it on there and use my brush to push it down in. Once I had a good layer everywhere, I kind of let it sit for a minute, and then I just took an old rag and started wiping off the excess because I didn't want to leave big globs of wax. And where I had gotten it on the picture, I just kind of blended it in with my rag and just kind of worked it up and continued to give it that age look. And I did end up going over the entire picture there. It is a print, but there's no glass, so it gave me a chance to kind of age the print too.
Just me in my garden with the birds and the leaves. I am someone under the sun. I am breathing, I am free.
Our next next project's going to be this resin finial. It has kind of a little bit of a metallic look to it. We are going to use the Debi's Design Diary Jami Ray Vintage Cottage color and some cinnamon. We're going to use the color Anvil. It is not a black. It is a perfect cast iron looking things. It's exactly that same kind of grayish black color that cast iron has. So it only takes one coat. We're just going to do a quick coat over this entire piece. And as soon as it's done, we're going to dump out some of our cinnamon here. And I'm just using my hands and kind of strategically placing it around on the feet. And then I'll start kind of dripping it around in some of the places where it would seem like it would rust anyway. And I'm just kind of trying to get in all those little cracks. And remember, my paint is wet, so it is sticking down in the paint here. And I do eventually just kind of take the shaker and dump some on there. But now this is just water, and I'm letting it run down the same way it would if something was rusting. You can kind of have that where it runs down the item here, you know. And I took my brush, which was still wet with my paint, and kind of pick up a little bit of the cinnamon, blob that in there. There's water all around in there, and I'm just trying to get that organic look. So here you can see what it looks like when it has completely dried. I think it looks just like a rusty cast iron piece. And to seal in that cinnamon, I am going to use more of my Debi's Design Diary clear wax, but I am going to put some on a plate because when I use that chip brush, I'm using the same chip brush that I actually used earlier. So I don't want to get that cinnamon down in there. So I didn't want to get cocoa down in it. I don't want to get cinnamon down in it. And I'm going to seal this entire piece in with that clear wax. At first glance, it makes it look like our rusty, crusty goodness is gone, but once the wax is cured and dries, you can see it again. So I have a second piece that I want to give this a try, but I'm going to do it a totally different way. So this lamp is also resin, but it makes it look like it's metal. So we painted it with the same Anvil, so the Jami Ray Vintage Cottage color Anvil, and then we're going to add our wax down in there, and I'm using this brush to get it down in all that detail really well because we need something for our cinnamon to stick to. So I'm just going to put some there, and then I will use my brush and pick it up and just kind of really work it down in all of that detail. So this is a real stiff brush, kind of like a stencil brush. And I'm just working it down inside all that detail.
And in the end, I'm just glad we're friends. And in the end, I'm just glad we're friends.
So using the wax to put our cinnamon in means that we don't actually need to seal it. And it's actually really off-label to seal over a wax, but I'm still going to use Rust-Oleum's Matte Clear and give it a couple coats just to make sure that I seal in my cinnamon and also give it that extra layer of protection because it really is the perfect color and shade I was going for a faux rusty cast iron.
Morning glories on the vine, oh, they're singing to me. Oh, I'm planted in my garden, don't think I will ever leave. I love the long days, don't want summer running away. Weeping willows giving shade underneath the trees. I am safe.
Okay, so we came out to the shop for our next one because we're going to attempt, I did pick up this cutting board at Goodwill, which just amazes me that Goodwill actually writes with a Sharpie on all of their items. So there's a nice two there. Anyway, I don't know what happened to Mark and Kaya and their love in the mountains, but this was at the thrift store. And we're going to try something crazy and see. It may be too deep, but we're going to see if we can't sand that off. I started out with a 60 grit and gave it, a really aggressive sand there, but I had to make sure that I went back and forth and went through the whole thing because I didn't want to just create a divot. But look, here it is. Mark and Kaya are no more, and you can't even tell that there were letters in there at all. So now I'm just going to use a 220 because it's really rough where I use the 60. And now that we're back in the house, we are going to use our kitchen ingredient with this Thrift flip. And this is just regular olive oil, like the kind I cook with. And it makes a wonderful butcher block or cutting board conditioner. So I'm just applying it straight to that and rubbing it in with a paper towel. I'm going to go all over both sides, around the edge, inside the handle, everywhere that I sanded. And sometimes it'll take more than one coat because because it's been sanded, it's like a brand new fresh piece of wood and you just want it to really be conditioned. Our next thrift flip is this aluminum pitcher. It is by Wherever, made in the USA, but before you come at me, because I'm about to paint over this, they are about $10 a dozen on eBay, even with that exact same pattern, and they really don't sell for very much, and I've had this for sale for over a year, and no one is interested. So we're going to give it a new look. So we're taking some tablespoons of baking soda, and then we are going to mix that with our Fusion paint in the color Carriage House. I discovered this green a couple videos ago and am absolutely in love. And the goal is to do about 50-50. I did not measure my paint. And if you have a little bit too much paint and you don't have that thick texture, you can add more baking soda or back and forth, until you have a gallon of it. No, seriously. Once you have the right texture, then you want to begin to paint. And I am going with all of my brush strokes in the same way. I want it to look like it has been thrown on a pottery wheel and that this is an actual handmade piece of pottery. And you can do that by doing it this way with all of your brush strokes going the same way. Or you can stipple it on there and just pounce it so that it kind of has more of just like a concrete look, if that's what you're going for. Because my paint is so thick now and it gives that same texture if you were using plaster of Paris or if you were using a salt wash or anything like that, and it gives that extra thickness, then you could probably get away with only one coat, but I do end up giving it 2 coats here on the outside only. I'm leaving the inside alone in case somebody actually wanted to continue to use this as a pitcher, but I am going to do all the way around the outside, including the handle.
I could never settle down too far away from my hometown. With my family I am bound. I stick by them till I'm in the ground. Resting on the myth of old, all of the stories I've been told.
Once my second coat has thoroughly dried, I am using the Debi's Design Diary Jami Vintage Cottage Color White Linen to give this little picture a dry brush top coat. And so even though the Carriage House is an all-in-one paint and it has a sealer in it, when you add the baking soda to it, it gives it that extra matte finish. I love the texture and I even love the color, but I really just wanted to do something to bring out all that texture, add a little bit of dimension. So to dry brush, you're going to dip your paint brush in the paint and then you're going to wipe most of it off. And I should have used a bigger brush. I'm kind of creating, it looks a little Dalmatian-y like with those spots there. So I'm going to use a wet wipe here and blend it in and that ended up being the perfect look. It just kind of looks like an old painted cement that has faded over time, but I really love the way it turned out, and I hope that you do too. Let me know if you've ever used baking soda or any additive in your paint to create this textured look.
Secret places hidden well, I gone now as far as I can tell. All I know is I'm on my way to become a poor excuse of a better one. I've come to realize time goes by on its own. I am stuck here without a home.
You know what this is? Can you guess? Bet you guessed right. It's a shoe shine box, and it has lots of really cool stuff inside. It has some old bottles, shoe shine brushes, some shoe polish, but we're going to use one of our kitchen ingredients to give this a makeover. I love stools, and I love risers, and I love storage boxes, so this is all in one. Look at that beautiful aging, and we are going to actually give this a first coat of the Carriage House green. I'm not going to sand or prep this in any way because we are going for a layered look. We want it to look like it has been painted different colors and that it has been around for 100 years and just been updated and worn and updated and worn. So we'll start. This is just our first layer.
Spring dreamer, here's my song for you. I'll hold you as winter passes through. Sweet dreamer, this is my prayer for you. Don't linger, let us start anew.
All right, so now we're going to take our sea salt, and it is coarse sea salt, and we are just going to get it on here in that wet paint. We're going to kind of pat that down. We want it to get all down in there. Going to try to go around the edges over here and stick it in there. You want to do this when your paint is still wet. Kind of get my brush here. Make sure it's stuck down in that wet paint. I'll go ahead and set the camera down and put some of it and get it around on the sides and over here in the front. Oh, we are on to our next layer. We're using the Debi's Design Diary clay-based paint in the color Hey Sailor. It is this beautiful navy blue. I've gone ahead and poured it out into a bowl so that I don't mix that salt in with the rest of my paint. I don't want to contaminate my paint here. So I don't even care if I really get complete coverage, but I'm just going to give it an overall coat everywhere that I have painted that green color, including over top of all of my salt. I absolutely love the way this came out. This is definitely my favorite. Let me know in the comments when the video is over which one was your favorite of all of the ones that we did today. Once everything was dry, we went outside to do this next step because one thing about Debi's Design Diary clay-based paint is it is very pigmented. So when you are sanding, you're going to have some colorful dust. And that's what I am doing. I am sanding with some 220 grit sandpaper here. I am just going to go over all of it and get it smooth. I'm going to go a little extra around the edges and anywhere that naturally it would be a little bit more worn. And you're going to see that where that salt was, that it created divots, and it really gives it that look like this paint job has been on there for the last 100 years, that it's had those multiple layers of paint. And then here I'm just cleaning up where the paint was on the inside. I decided to go ahead and get that all clean and natural, and sandpaper was the easiest way. Debi's Design Diary paint is very wonderful to wet distress. So I'm just using a wet wipe and kind of getting rid of some of that extra sanding dust, but then also just using a wet wipe to get down to that beautiful green color underneath here. So some places it goes all the way down to that wood, and you can see that beautiful natural dark wood under there. And then other places it's just distressed down to the green color. All right, so we go back in the house so we can give this a final seal with Debi's Design Diary wax in the color clear. And it makes it look like it's going to be a lot darker here. The final color, once wax has cured, is somewhere between the dry, powdery matte color and this color. It's a little bit more like what color the paint is when you look in the jar. So when it's wet, it looks a lot darker here, but you're going to wipe that wax on and then you will wipe off the excess. And oh, look at that. It's so pretty. You can see kind of the worn and crackle from where I used that salt mixture. But you can always bring it back if you want it to be a shinier sheen. You can always buff it and it will actually bring a beautiful shine.
You loved me when the sun rays hit the sidewalk, and the streets were flooded with gold. When the treetops swayed through breezy mornings, and everything was so sure and bold.
All right, our next and final thrift flip using kitchen items today are these 3 flour sack towels. I've had these in my stash for so long, trying to decide what I wanted to do with them, and so I think today is absolutely the perfect time to try this next thing out. So these are beautiful. They're huge, but they're just too white. So we're going to use Folgers Coffee bags to give these a new look. So you can use instant coffee for this, and a lot of people do, and maybe it's easier, but this is what I had on hand. They're just like tea bags, except they're coffee. So I'm going to go ahead and use 2 of them. This is actually hot water in this little bucket, and I do rip one of them, so I end up with some coffee grinds in the water, but it really doesn't affect it at all. So I leave this and let it sit for probably about 5 minutes. I didn't time it. I didn't really pay attention. I just was doing other things, and it was probably about 5 minutes that I let those sit in there and then scoop them out. And you can see how dark it is already. Now, you can put more in there, or you can leave it in there longer if you are going for something a little bit darker than what we accomplish here. So I'm just going to take all 3 of those flour sack towels, and I do want to say they are 100% cotton. If you try this with things that are not cotton, it won't dye. And then I took it outside and I wrung them out. I dumped out my bucket and wrung them out, and then completely let them dry. And this is what they look like once they are dry. They have that beautiful antique vintage color. This is just a white paper towel. I just wanted to show you the difference there between what that was before and what it is now. So now that they're dry, we are going to stamp on them. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue to use my wonderful Hey Sailor Navy Blue, and we're going to use my brayer with an IOD stamp. This is Floral Branch, and I have completely, I left the stamps on the backer and cut them out. It's the first time I've actually done that. I've seen other people do that and decided that that was a great way to not only see what the stamp looks like really well because of the design is on the back of the backer. And then also it allows me something to hold on to without requiring an additional backer to be able to hold it. So using the DIY paint, it dries really fast and it kind of reduces your work time to be able to do that. And I'm using this brayer, trying to get it on there without getting my paint too gloppy and down in the design, because this is IOD stamps have just incredible level of design in them, and if you get too much paint on there, it will get down in between there, if that makes any sense. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining that very well, and it makes your design a little blurry. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So here I used the paint, and you can see I keep one hand on the stamp at all times because you don't want to smear your design. So I'm kind of pushing down with my fingertips, and when I begin to push down with the other hand, I will hold with one hand, push with one hand. And here I am peeling up my paint, and we'll let that dry. I'm going to then also use the IOD ink. This will give you a much crisper image. So if you're using the ink pad here, it'll really give you a much crisper image, and it gives you a longer working time. One of the things, though, is that and you can see here I'm actually using a brayer. It's an old wood brayer, and that's helping to make sure that my stamp is down all the way. But my stamp pad needed to be reloaded, so this is a much paler stamp than it would be had my stamp pad not been a little bit drier. So that is my fault there. It's not an indication of what it normally would be like, but I didn't know where my bottle of ink was, so I did not reload my stamp pad. But I kind of like that worn look. It goes really well with the vintage of what we were doing. And so I do go ahead and finish the stamp. I did it on both of them, even though you only saw me do the one initial swag there. But I do go ahead and do the bows and the drop swag there, and then I of course have to add a bird because that is just what makes it absolutely perfect. So here, and again, I'm just using that wood brayer to make sure that all of my ink goes down there. And now we're going to look at our third one, and here I'm actually using, this is the Jami Ray Vintage bird logo, and it is a stencil from the Jami Ray Vintage stencil collection. And I'm using that Carriage House Fusion all-in-one paint. It has that sealer in it, and so it's another one that's a really good paint to use. And I'm using a Jami Ray Vintage stencil brush to put this little bird on there. I'm going to go ahead and do 3 all the way across the bottom. I just kind of space them out in the space that I have. I have a plastic cutting board underneath here because I felt like with my stencil, I didn't want it to be soft. I wanted to make sure it was hard, and the little rubber pad that I had underneath there between the counter and the towel was a little mushy, so I thought I would go ahead and just use a cutting board. But here we go, and we'll do a third one. I think they're turning out really well. What you're not going to see me do here is I do heat set it by putting them in the dryer. You can also use an iron over it and heat set it that way. But you want to make sure that you do heat set your ink and your paint. But here they are all finished. I think they all turned out great. What do you guys think?